While Dan is trying to comprehend this, she tells him that she also put a drug in the alcohol he drank, hoping to help the people who are coming to kill him. Dan is terrified and starts banging on the house, trying to wake everyone up to get them out of the house quickly before the criminals arrive, but he trips and falls due to the effect of the drug. Svetlana then informs everyone of the situation and gives them her old car so they can escape. Kyle and Omar carry Dan, and the whole family goes down to the garage and gets ready to leave. But as soon as they arrive, they hear a loud noise coming from outside and understand that the men are waiting for them at the door. They put Dan in the car and seat him in the back seat. Jessica encourages Kyle and tells him to drive them away quickly. After that, Kyle breaks the garage door and catches the men off guard, and the men chase them and start pursuing their small car. The car enters narrow streets and causes a disturbance. After a long and terrifying chase, the family manages to escape. The next day, the family stops to rest and discuss the possibilities ahead of them. The first possibility that comes up is for them to run away and start a new life in another place, and keep running from Finn and the police, who are convinced that Dan and Jessica robbed the bank. The second possibility is for them to surrender and file a complaint against Finn, which will likely expose Dan and tell that he is Sean McAvoy and will expose all his old crimes, which will send Dan to prison immediately. But the family decides to avoid these two possibilities because they will lose in both cases. And while they are trying to find a more practical solution, Omar suggests that they talk to his father, but the family ignores him and refuses to hear his idea at all. After that, Dan decides that the only way to defeat Finn is to take over the device first. But to do that, he will need to enter the mansion, which is heavily protected. So he holds a family meeting, and everyone tries to think of a good solution, and they decide that the best way to enter the mansion is through the roof. After that, Kyle gives Dan a flash drive that he can use to erase all the things on the device and delete the files that contain the evidence Finn has against Sean McAvoy. Then Dan begins distributing the mission tools he took from Svetlana's house, and they think of a plan to storm the mansion. Then he tells Jessica to cancel everything, take the children, and disappear if the mission fails. Here, he finally accepts that Omar is one of them. After that, Dan and Omar go to the roof of the mansion and climb over the wall like professionals, and the rest wait for them in the car and try to help them. After Omar and Dan climb onto the roof, they disable the surveillance cameras. Then Dan uses Omar and makes him distract the men, and he meets a man he knew before. Dan resists the man's attempt to lure him into a confrontation and throws the weapon from his hand and tells him to cuff himself quietly. But the guard takes this opportunity to pull out the second pistol he has and points it at Dan, holding him at gunpoint. Dan deals with this with his experience and manages to defeat the guard. After that, they use the advanced tools they have, and Kyle manages to use the unconscious guard's voice and replies to Finn, who asks for a security report on the area he is guarding. Then Dan gives orders to Omar and tells him to disable the last camera and go downstairs. At that time, his friends are holding protests against oil companies to create a distraction, and as soon as Nina sees this, she joins them and takes them to the mansion gate and says that the owner of the mansion is the owner of a large oil company that harms the environment. But as soon as she leaves the demonstrations, the police come to arrest her and start questioning her about her involvement in these demonstrations. And when Omar knows this from afar, he creates a problem to distract them and gets arrested, and this gives Nina a chance to escape. While Finn is focusing on the demonstrators outside his house, as they had planned, Dan opens the roof window and climbs down to the floor above the mansion, which we discover here was his room when he was young. Inside, he is surprised when he finds that his father left the room as it was, and he begins walking around the room, affected and remembering his memories. But a little later, Finn becomes suspicious of the demonstrations outside his house and decides to search the mansion and catches Dan. And Dan's family becomes tense because they can hear everything. After that, Finn shoots Dan until Vikram intervenes and informs his new boss that they have special rooms for unwelcome people and advises him to take Dan and go there. Dan deliberately throws Kyle's flash drive and follows Finn and goes down with him. A little later, Finn sees the listening devices that Dan is wearing and tells his family that they will never see Dan again. When the family hears this, they are terrified and try to decide what to do. Kyle notices that his father left the flash drive and tells them that although the situation is difficult, they can help Dan and get to the device, even though Dan told them to run away if anything happened. Jessica decides to help her husband and goes to the mansion and warns her children and tells them to go to the embassy if things get out of hand. After that, Jessica jumps from the building to get there, and there she enters Dan's room and looks at her husband's room when he was young. And then she finds the flash drive. Nina encourages her, and Jessica takes the flash drive and goes to the office with it. On the other side, Vikram takes Finn, and they take Dan to an area where the sound is isolated so they can kill him at their leisure. But when Dan stands above the pit, Vikram pulls the plug and makes Dan fall before Finn shoots, and thus Vikram saves his life. Finn is furious when he finds that Vikram betrayed him and confronts him, but Vikram remains firm in his place. At this time, upstairs, Jessica finally reaches the office and inserts the flash drive, and this helps Kyle enter the system. After that, Kyle turns on the surveillance cameras, and he and Nina help Jessica walk around the house and move away from the guards. A little later, Jessica is forced to hide in the closet, and when one of the guards enters the office, she waits inside until she leaves. But when Jessica feels cornered, she is forced to jump on her and surprise her, and then the two confront each other. At this time, in the tunnel, Dan kills the guards one after the other, and since he knows this tunnel from his childhood, he knows how to handle things, hides and confronts the guards. At that time, the children watch what is happening in the office, terrified for their mother, and Jessica fights this criminal until she finally makes her lose consciousness. At this time outside, Nina sees Finn's men approaching their car and tells Kyle to quickly finish deleting the files from the device so they can escape. At that time, Jessica runs out of the mansion and goes to her children to help them. At this time in the mansion, Finn is terrified when he finds that someone has hacked the device, and this means that $500 million has flown away from him, in addition to the files that were deleted, so he swears that he will kill Dan and his children to take revenge on them. At that time outside, Jessica takes her children and helps them escape from the area. And after they escape from Finn's men, she and her children surrender to the police and tell them their identity, and they ask them to help them. On the other side, Dan and Finn confront each other again until Dan finally defeats him, cuffs him, and hangs him with a rope from the ceiling. After that, Dan is arrested as he leaves the mansion, but he is relieved when he finds that his family is fine, even though they are handcuffed. After that, while they are discussing what will happen to them, they realize that no matter where they are, the important thing is that they are together. A little later, Omar arrives with his father, who turns out to be the secretary to an Interpol general, and he helps them get out. After that, Jessica gathers her courage and finally tells Dan about the Ohio matter, and he is very happy for her and supports her. 11 months later in Ohio, Jessica, Dan, and Max settle into their new home and prepare the house to receive Nina and Kyle, who traveled for their studies. Jessica is very successful in her job and is very happy with her new life. Dan always communicates with Omar, and they video chat, and each of them informs the other of what is new in his life, and they are very happy with their relationship with each other. Dan is very happy when Omar tells him that he will visit them for New Year's Eve. A month later, Dan goes to visit Finn in prison and gives him a jacket similar to the one he is wearing as a New Year's gift because he knows that it will matter to him and will make him feel that he truly considers him his brother. After that, the two play a game together and begin to form a brotherly bond between them. And here the events of our story end today. Wait for me in new videos and summaries. Peace.